Traditional gardeners handled pests without chemicals because they understood the living system under the soil. Every garden pest problem starts the same: spray, brief relief, then they come back. 9 methods. All of them prevent damage before it starts. None of them come from a bottle. 1. The soil beneath the problem. Every gardener has stood in the same aisle, bought a different bottle, and watched the same pests come back 2 weeks later. The problem was never the product, it was the assumption that the problem lived on the leaf. Most gardeners treat pest damage as a surface event, something happening on the leaf, the stem, the fruit. So they treat the surface. What traditional gardeners understood, and what soil science has spent decades confirming, is that pest pressure is almost always a signal coming from underground. Healthy soil, biologically active, rich in organic matter, dense with microbial life, produces plants with measurably stronger cell walls and higher concentrations of their own natural defensive compounds. Plants grown in living soil are not just bigger, they're chemically harder to eat. Penn State and Cornell both studied this. Plants grown in compost-rich soil took noticeably more pest pressure before showing damage and recovered faster when they did. The plant becomes its own first line of defense. The pest finds it less attractive, moves on, and the gardener never knows the threat was there. The fix isn't complicated, but it requires consistency. 2 to 3 inches of well-aged compost worked into the top 4 to 6 inches of soil every spring, not once. Not when the damage is already visible, but every single season without exception. Compost that includes aged animal manure builds a soil microbiome so diverse it starts functioning less like dirt and more like a living immune system beneath your plants. After 2 to 3 seasons, the garden changes in ways that no spray ever produced. Stems thicken. Color deepens. Minor pest feeding heals faster than it spreads. The pest problem most gardeners are trying to spray away was created in the soil years before the damage appeared on the leaf. What's growing in that soil also determines what shows up above it, and the next principle uses that relationship in a way that will completely change how you think about what to plant. Next, to what? 2. The confusion strategy. Most pests don't find your plants by sight. They navigate by smell, following the chemical signals your tomatoes, peppers, and squash release into the air like a broadcast. A single crop row is essentially a homing signal with nothing interrupting it. Traditional gardeners broke that signal on purpose, and they did it with plants already growing in the kitchen garden. Scientists who study insects have a name for this. When strong-smelling plants surround a target crop, the pest can't lock onto the signal it's following and gives up. Aphids, cabbage moths, tomato hornworms, and cucumber beetles all navigate this way. Interrupt the signal and they move on without ever finding what they came for. The pairings that traditional gardeners landed on through generations of observation are the same ones modern research keeps confirming. Basil planted 8 to 10 inches from tomato stems reduces aphid, whitefly, and hornworm pressure. Dill and cilantro tucked between cabbage and kale repel cabbage moths, and when they flower, they pull in parasitic wasps that hunt the caterpillars already present. French marigolds along the border release a compound from their roots called alpha-terthionyl that suppresses soil nematodes, while their scent above ground deters whiteflies and squash bugs. 3 different plants managing 3 different problems without a single active intervention. The garden that confuses pests doesn't look like a defensive system. It looks like an abundance. That's the point. Most gardeners have already lost the thing that was protecting them and never connected the two. The next section explains exactly how that happens. 3. The allies you keep killing. Most gardeners reach for a spray the moment they see a bug. That habit is the most expensive mistake in the garden, not because of what it costs at the register, but because of what it destroys that you can't see or replace. Every time a broad-spectrum spray hits your plants, it doesn't just kill the pest you're targeting. It resets the beneficial insect population that was already working to control that pest for free. A single ladybug eats up to 50 aphids a day. One lacewing larva consumes 200 aphids in its short lifetime. Parasitic wasps lay their eggs inside hornworms and cabbage worms, killing them from the inside out before they finish feeding. Ground beetles patrol the soil surface at night, hunting slugs, cutworms, and grubs. These aren't bystanders. They're a pest control operation running continuously, season after season, as long as you don't interrupt it. Traditional gardeners kept these allies by giving them 2 things: food and shelter. A strip planted with sweet alyssum, yarrow, dill, and fennel gives beneficial insects the nectar and pollen they need to stay through the full season. A few flat stones, an uncut strip along the fence line, undisturbed soil near the border. These aren't signs of a neglected garden, they're infrastructure. Ground beetles need somewhere to overwinter, spiders need undisturbed ground. Without that, they leave and don't return. The pest came back because something was missing, and what was missing had been there the whole time before the spray took it out. 4. The morning walk. Here's what a bad season looks like. You walk out one Tuesday and a full branch on your tomatoes is stripped. You spray, you wait, it happens again 2 rows over. By the time you feel like you're managing it, you've already lost 6 weeks of growth and bought 3 bottles of something that only half worked. That's not bad luck. That's what happens when small problems get the time they need to become large ones. Traditional gardeners didn't prevent pest damage by knowing more chemistry. They prevented it by walking their garden every morning before the day started. Not a casual glance, a deliberate, methodical pass through every row, turning leaves over, checking stems, running eyes along the soil line. When they found something, they picked it off by hand and dropped it into a bucket of soapy water. 2 hornworms on Monday never became 20 by Friday. The technique is straightforward. 15 to 20 minutes, a small bucket, half filled with water, and a drop of dish soap, starting at one end and working through every row without skipping. For tomatoes, look for dark droppings on lower leaves. That's the hornworm above giving itself away before you ever spot the camouflage. For squash and cucumbers, flip the leaves and check for clusters of small bronze eggs on the undersides. Scraping them off takes 3 seconds. Dealing with what hatches takes 3 weeks. For brassicas, watch for white butterflies hovering. They're not passing through. They're laying eggs on the underside of every leaf they land on. The morning walk doesn't just catch problems early. After 2 seasons, it builds a knowledge of your garden's rhythms that no spray schedule can replicate. The next principle flips everything you just learned. Instead of chasing pests out, traditional gardeners sometimes invited them in, just not where it mattered. 5. The wrong address. Most pest control logic assumes the goal is total exclusion to keep them out entirely. That's the assumption worth questioning. Insects are better at locating food than any trap or barrier ever devised. Traditional gardeners stopped trying to win that fight. Instead, they gave the pest a better destination. Trap cropping is planting something a pest wants more than your main crop, then placing it where you can afford the loss. This isn't just an old folk trick, it's a strategy that commercial organic farms use today to reduce intervention costs significantly. The pest follows its instincts perfectly and lands exactly where you wanted it. Aphids are wildly more attracted to nasturtiums than beans, peppers, or tomatoes. Plant nasturtiums around the outer edge of your garden, 6 to 8 inches apart, and the aphid population that would have covered your pepper stems clusters on the nasturtiums instead. Once loaded, the ladybugs and lacewings from your beneficial insect strip clean them up, and the trap crop becomes a feeding station for your allies. 2 problems handled with 1 planting. Flea beetles will abandon eggplant and young brassicas for a row of radishes planted 2 feet in front of your main crop. Blue Hubbard squash placed at the far corners of a property pulls squash vine borers and cucumber beetles away from every other cucurbit growing there. You're not trying to save the Blue Hubbard. It's a decoy. The pest does exactly what it was designed to do. It just does it somewhere that costs you nothing. Most people walk past the tools for this every single day, and what's coming is going to make that very hard to ignore. 6. What the fence line already knows. Something grows along most fence lines untended, unremarkable, apparently useless. What traditional gardeners noticed, and what took generations to fully understand, is that the vegetables growing nearest to those wild border plants consistently showed less pest damage than everything planted 10 feet away. Nobody planned it. They just stopped pulling those plants out, and the garden got quieter every season. Elderberry is one of them. The leaves release volatile compounds called sesquiterpenes continuously through the growing season, the same class of chemicals that make certain plants unpleasant for insects to land on and feed near. Aphid and cucumber beetle pressure drops measurably in the zone around an established elderberry, not reduced to a level the beneficial insect population can manage without intervention. Tansy does something different. Its active compound, thujoni, works as a contact and airborne repellent for ants, squash bugs, houseflies, and the Colorado potato beetle. A row of tansy along a border isn't decorative, it's a perimeter. Wormwood Artemisia absinthium covers flea beetles, cabbage moths, and carrot flies within a radius of several feet from a single plant. Both are aggressive spreaders, which is exactly why traditional gardeners planted them at the edges rather than inside the bed. None of these need watering, fertilizing, or replacing. They show up every spring on their own and go back to work. The fence line was never empty space. It was pest management running without being asked. Before you put a single seed in the ground next spring, there's one decision that will shape how resistant your whole garden is, and most gardeners skip it entirely. 7. The seed that remembers your garden. Before a single seed went in the ground, traditional gardeners walked last season's beds looking for one thing: what survived. Not the biggest plant, not the most productive, the one that took pest pressure and kept going while its neighbours collapsed. That plant was expressing something in its genetics the others weren't. Save seed from it, grow it again the following season, and save again from the strongest survivor. After 5 or 6 seasons, you have a variety selected for resistance to the specific pests in your specific soil, your specific microclimate. Not resistance in general resistance to what actually lives in your garden. No catalogue seed can replicate that, because no catalogue seed has spent 6 years in your conditions. This is why heirloom varieties grown in the same region for generations often hold up better against local pest pressure than newer hybrids with commercial breeding behind them. They've been filtered by exactly the environment they're growing in. The gardener doing the filtering didn't need a lab. They needed the discipline to save from the right plant 2 seasons in a row. Start with one crop this season. Let the strongest survivor go to seed. The results won't be dramatic in year 1. By year 3, they will be. When the season throws something at you faster than that system can respond, here's what traditional gardeners reach for, and you've almost certainly got everything you need to make it. 8. The kitchen pharmacy and when not to reach for it. There's a version of this section that makes it sound like a miracle formula. That's worth resisting. This isn't a standalone solution, and treating it like one is how gardeners end up back in the same spray cycle they were trying to leave. What it is: a targeted, fast-acting backup for the moments when pest pressure moves faster than your beneficial insect population can catch up. 4 to 5 garlic cloves, 2 hot peppers, chopped and steeped in a quart of warm water for 12 hours. Strain through cheesecloth into a spray bottle, add 1 teaspoon of plain dish soap. The soap breaks down the waxy coating on soft-bodied insects and helps the solution stick to the leaf. The garlic and pepper compounds disrupt the sensory systems insects use to locate food. They don't die, they relocate. And every beneficial insect in your garden stays completely unaffected. Apply in early morning or late evening, never in midday sun where soap can burn leaves. Focus on the undersides where pests feed and shelter. One application holds 5 to 7 days and needs reapplying after heavy rain. Use it when a new planting is too exposed to wait, or when a population spikes faster than your allies can respond. The spray buys time, the system behind it does the actual work. One final principle remains so simple it never made it into a single gardening book, and effective enough that traditional gardeners rarely lost a seedling to the most common killer in the spring garden. 9. The cardboard secret. The most vulnerable moment in any garden isn't drought, disease, or a pest swarm. It's the first 2 weeks after a seedling goes into the ground. Cutworms larvae that move along the soil surface after dark can sever a young stem at soil level in a single pass. By morning, the plant is lying on its side. Most gardeners assume they watered wrong, planted too shallow, or just lost a bad one. The cutworm is never suspected because it's already gone by sunrise. Traditional gardeners solve this with a toilet paper roll. That's the entire method. A cardboard tube pressed 1 inch into the soil around the base of each transplant, rising 2 inches above the surface. The collar creates a physical barrier the cutworm can't cross without exposure, and it holds through the only window that matters. After 4 to 6 weeks, the cardboard breaks down naturally right around the time the stem has hardened enough that cutworms can no longer damage it anyway. No plastic, chemicals, or a second step. The simplest solutions in the garden are almost always the oldest ones, not because traditional gardeners lacked options, but because they had enough seasons behind them to know what actually held up over time. If any part of this changes how you see your garden, subscribe. There's a lot more of this kind of deep dive coming. Tell me in the comments, which of these 9 are you starting with, and what pest has been winning in your garden this season?